Hello, I'm Marc Webb, director of The Amazing Spider-Man in 3D, and welcome to 3D 101, where I'm going to give you a little tutorial about shooting on 3D. What you see here is the 3reality rig mounted with two cameras, which is what we use to shoot The Amazing Spider-Man. You know, there's two major settings that you're dealing with. One is I/O, or interaxial, which is the separation of the two cameras, and that you control. You can see here this camera, when I shift this over like this, it creates the separation between this camera and the camera that's horizontal, and that creates the sense of depth. The width of the cameras really lets you make things feel much deeper or shallower depending on what you're doing. And then you have convergence, which is the angle at which the cameras converge. And that creates basically where the screen plane of the camera is. And then you project those images, and that allows each eye to see something that's slightly divergent, which is how you experience the 3D imagery. The standard depth is about the width of two human eyes. That creates a sensation where it feels like an authentic, very realistic 3D experience. If you push them out further, you get a little bit more depth and space, but it has other consequences sometimes. When you're doing a big cityscape, you have to put the eyes further and further out in order to create any sense of dimension, because everything's so far away from you and you still want to get that depth. If you put the eyes 6 feet apart, it actually makes things look a little bit smaller. So if a giant were to walk to New York City and his eyes were 6 feet apart, it's how he would see the city, as a small sort of miniaturized thing. That's how you can sort of imagine the scale of the 3D imagery. There is a relationship between the interaxial, the convergence, and the depth of the space in which you're shooting. And you want to work within certain parameters so that the images that are furthest away from you don't become too extreme, because that will strain the eye. So it's really important, in order to prevent fatigue over long periods of time, to remain within a certain depth budget. And so there's always this equation that you're trying to balance and create a smooth but effective and interesting use of depth. The other thing is, when you're editing in 3D, you tend to hold on images for a little bit longer. Fast cuts aren't as effective because they can actually throw you off a little bit. And it takes a minute for your eyes to relax and absorb the information. So some of the more exciting pieces of 3D require a longer flow. And so ideally you do longer takes that help you adjust and absorb the depth that you're in.
Many of these wonderful creatures are so brilliantly adapted that they can regenerate entire limbs at will.
I love that sensation of when kids are in the audience and they reach out and try to interact with the images on screen. And what was great about the Tree of Life is I could take these graphics and push them out into the audience a little bit further. And I had a lot of control over those images, so they weren't invading or falling off the edge of the screen. And we spent a lot of time talking about volume and creating a sense of all these depth cues, whether it was the keys or a little bit of floating three-dimensional pixels there to give it a sense of space and dimension, which I thought was an effective way to use 3D. This is a sequence that was all point of view, and I actually trimmed it in the movie, and I just got back from the IMAX screening, and I kicked myself because I cut it into like 3 or 4 different little pieces, and originally it was this one long piece of this guy running over the rooftops and jumping over the edge and like flinging up to this reflection, and it was a sort of a way to reveal the suit, and it was a way to create that subjective thing. And when I was watching it on small screens, it lost a little bit of its meaning. But then I watched part of it in the IMAX 3D environment, and there was a part of me I was like, I should have hung on that. But that Mirror's Edge sequence was designed to put the audience in Spider-Man's shoes and to see the world as he sees it in a very specific, very literal way. So that was the original design of it, and as movies do, they take their own shape and you trim things, and sometimes you wish you would have hung on to them a little bit longer, but it's the way it goes. Yeah, the crane sequence, there's a few things going on there. One, I wanted to start to create that sense of vertigo, but also it was about moving the camera alongside of Spider-Man. Again, it's a subjective thing. I wanted us to hurtle through the air along with Spider-Man, And it was a sequence that was created in CGI, and the camera, we virtually mounted the camera to Spider-Man in a way that would have been impossible to do practically. And then we added the camera shake and a little bit of turbulence in the image to create that sense of reality, and that played a big role in how that sequence was put together. Thanks for coming by for the your little basic 3D tutorial. I've included some scenes on this Blu-ray for you to mess around with on your own. You can view different convergence settings by pressing the angle button on your remote. So, enjoy. If you just hit the angle button on your computer, or, sorry, let's start again. I would think there's enough dials on here that I should have an angle button. I don't actually have one. I'm envious of your angle button. This controller is also a gun, a laser gun. On your, why are you laughing? Why are people laughing? See that guy over there? Not anymore, because he's dead. Get interactive and enjoy yourself, but not too interactive. I don't know where that came from. We can try it again if you want. I'm happy to try it again.